In this video, we're going to go ahead and see how to tweak, alter, and produce good quality results with the caustic effect here in mental ray. So let's go ahead and do a test render here just to see what we've got, what we're going to start off with here. Okay, there we go. So it's actually a pretty decent result. If you look very closely, however, there is some splotching, speckling on the back wall over there, and the caustic effect here on the ground just in front of the vase has a little bit of splotching to it. It's not very smooth, and doesn't look too great for a final result. Let me also go ahead and turn off or toggle off the UI here in the render frame window. Not using it, so what's the point of having it open? Let me go to the render setup over here and make some changes to this. Okay, now up here in the caustic settings, we don't have a lot of caustic settings to play around with, so that's actually a pretty good thing. It means we don't have to worry about too many different settings and parameters and all this stuff. Okay, here we have a multiplier. Now the multiplier just controls the brightness of the caustics, just like we've seen with the multiplier for final gather and multiplier for global illumination. So if we increase this to 5, for example, and we render this out again, what we're going to end up is with some pretty bright caustics, as you can see. A little bit too bright, practically looks like it's glowing. So let's go back to a setting of 1. We can also alter the color of caustic, so we can keep it at a neutral white, which is the default, or we can choose any other color we want if we'd like to do that. Right now we are using a color, we're using green, but it's not being controlled from here. It's actually being controlled by the light parameters. Okay, so let me go ahead and render this out again, just so we don't have those bright caustics. Now the next setting is the maximum number of photons per sample. This works very similar to the maximum number of photons per sample for the global illumination down here. Okay, the default setting is 100. Unlike the global illumination photons per sample, however, or accuracy setting, we don't have to go for a really high number like 2,000 or 4,000, anything like that. We can actually use pretty low numbers. Let's go ahead and take this number down to something like, say, 10. And let's render this out again, just to show the dramatic effect here of reducing this accuracy here. You can see now that you can see practically the individual caustic photons here. Kind of looks pretty neat, actually. Kind of looks like an underwater type scene. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is we have to use a pretty good maximum number of photons per sample here, or accuracy setting. I like to refer to this as the accuracy setting, and increase it pretty good. So let's go to a setting of about 500 to get ourselves a pretty good result. Let's render again. And the result looks pretty decent, but we still have some splotching and things in the scene. So when you get to this point, really increasing this accuracy setting here to anything higher than 500 is not really going to make a difference. Instead, what you should do is increase the number of photons being emitted by that caustic light. That's what's going to make the difference. But we'll see that in a moment. Then we have a maximum sampling radius. And if we turn that on, we turn on the manual mode and we can set a radius value whatever we want. If it's off, which is the default, mental ray chooses a max sampling radius for us automatically based on the scene size. Let's go to manual mode here and use a setting of 1. Render this out, see what we get. Okay, a good thing and a bad thing happened here. On the upside, on the good side, we got rid of all the blotching and little speckling that was everywhere, and now our result looks nice and smooth without any artifacts. On the downside, here's the negative to this. We lost the definition of the caustic effect. It doesn't look so well defined anymore. In fact, it just looks like a smooth blob. In fact, it was smooth too much. That's not good. So the maximum sampling radius, if it's too large, will kill the caustic effect, which is obviously not good. So what you have to do is use a very small number. So let's try something like 0.1 and render this out again. And now we can see we get our splotching back. The good thing to this is we got our definition back, so we can see the individual lines and shape of the caustic effect. But the downside is we get that blotching back again. And to get rid of that blotching, we'd have to use a higher number of photons. Okay, so let me actually turn that setting off to go back to automatic mode, because as you saw before, the automatic mode was actually looking pretty good. So mental ray was doing a good job. Okay, down here we have a filter and we have 3 choices. We can go for cone filter, which gives us a sharp caustic effect. We can go for Gaussian filter, which is going to try to blur and smooth out the caustic effect, and that's not what I want. Really depends on the style you're going for. The box is sort of an in-between, gives you a little bit of both. It's not as soft as Gaussian, and it's not as sharp as a cone. Gives you a sort of in-between balance, okay? I like using a cone, simply because I like it when my caustics have a sharp look to them. Gaussian's okay if you're going for a smoother result for your caustics. I suggest sticking with cone. The default is box. I'll select cone. Now the filter size here actually adjusts the way that this filter is going to affect your caustics. Let's actually go ahead and do a render here using a cone filter and a default filter size of 1.1. Okay. Now for most purposes, you usually don't have to change the filter size. You could if you want to. So let's go with a filter size of 5 and render this out. I don't recommend changing the filter size. I normally don't. If you notice, the caustic effect gets a little bit blurred out and the definition is lost a little bit. Not that bad, but it has been lost a little bit and it's a little bit smoother. But that's not what I like. I prefer to keep the filter size of 1.1, which is a very small filter size and will yield a very sharp caustic effect. In my opinion, I prefer the sharper caustic effect simply because it just looks nicer and looks more defined. Then we have this setting here that says opaque shadows when caustics are enabled, and it's turned on by default. What this does, it turns on opaque shadows. If we turn it off, we're going to have transparent shadows. Having transparent shadows can look a little bit better, but it can also add render time to your scene. But it also depends on the project you're doing. So in some cases you'll see a difference, some cases you won't, and in some cases, depending on your scene again, it could increase your render time. The default option is on. I'll keep it on for this scene. It'll work out just fine. Okay, now let's see how to change the caustic effect based on the material on the vase. So let me open up the material editor and make sure you select the glass material in the upper left slot here in the material editor. Now let's go to the index of refraction. Changing the index of refraction actually changes the shape and the definition of the caustic effect. So let's take this index of refraction and let's go ahead and select 1, which is the index of refraction of air. And let's render this out, see what happens. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and take this index of refraction here and let's change it. Right now I have it set to 1.52 and you can see the way that it looks. Let's change it to something like, say, 1.1. Okay, that's totally going to change the index of refraction here. Let me clone this render just so I can come back and compare it afterwards. Let's render this out and see what we end up with. And here it is. You can see that just changing the index of refraction on the material completely changed the caustics and the way that these caustic photons are basically refracted through this glass. So if I bring back the original render here on the right, this is the index of refraction set to 1.52. This is an index of refraction set to 1.1. So you can clearly see how changing the index of refraction completely changes the caustic effect in the scene. So you can actually experiment here if you like and try different numbers. Try 1.4, 1.6, or a neat exercise is to go on the internet, do a Google search for different indices of refraction, and just have a look at different values for different materials in the real world. Depending on what type of glass an object is, or if an object is even glass to begin with. An object could be a diamond or maybe a ruby or anything like that. It's all going to have a different index of refraction and it's all going to give you a different caustic effect. So I'm going to leave mine at 1.52 since it looked fine. Okay. Now I've got myself the splotchy result here. What I'm going to do is try to get myself a nice smooth caustic effect, while at the same time keeping the definition of the caustic effect and not losing it. So to do that, it's actually going to be pretty simple actually. I'm going to select the spotlight here, and in the mental rate indirect illumination parameters, I'm just going to add more caustic photons. I'm going to go with 500,000, so 500,000. And 500,000 photons will actually work out pretty well. Let me go to my render setup window here, just to check out my render settings, make sure they're good. Okay, I'm happy with my accuracy setting of 500. My filter type and my filter size are fine. I'm happy with mental rate choosing the max sampling radius for me automatically. That'll work out just fine. Okay, so let me close this. Oh, and just a reminder here, just like with global illumination, photon maps, and final gather maps, we can go down to the reuse rollout, and we can actually render out a caustic photon map. Caustic photon maps and global illumination photon maps are the same thing. They're not different. They're the same thing. They're photon maps. So it works the same exact way. So let me go ahead and close this and let's do a final render. Okay, there we go. Alright, so the caustic effect is done. You can see that the splotching on the back wall is gone. The speckling over here is also gone. Our caustic effect looks very nice and smooth with no artifacts. At the same time, we have definition in the caustic effect. We can see these curves and these neat little lines and shapes and things like that. Awesome. So there you go. That's caustics in mental ray. So that brings us to the end of this chapter on caustics, and also to the end of this tutorial for rendering with mental ray with 3ds Max 2010. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot of cool features and take advantage of a lot of the new features in 3ds Max 2010, as well as some of the old features and neat new features that have been introduced now with this integration with mental ray. So as you can see, mental ray is a pretty powerful renderer, and we can use it for doing all kinds of different effects and different types of lighting, and you can really take advantage of it and take your renders up to the next level and create some really good professional grade high quality stuff. Okay, so from everyone here at i3D Tutorials, we'd like to thank you for supporting i3D and choosing us as your training provider for 3ds Max training. We will be coming out with more 3ds Max training, so keep checking back at i3dtutorials.com pretty often at our forums. You can drop some suggestions there, some comments or feedback, or maybe even give us a wish list of the kind of training you like to see or the kind of topics you like to see covered. We're always open to training, and in the end, this training's for you guys, so we're glad to take your suggestions and feedback and try to incorporate that as much as possible in the training so you can benefit the most out of these training products. So thanks again from i3 Jack and everyone here at i3tutorials.com. We really thank you for your time and hope to see you again soon for more 3ds Max training. Thanks and take care.